The ground was cold and rough under her, stones pressing into her skin as she lay with her wrists tied tightly behind her back. Smoke rose from the battlefield, carrying the smell of burned metal and blood. The last cries of her people had already gone silent, and that silence told her everything. She was captured, helpless in the hands of the enemy she feared most. Footsteps came closer. She raised her head and saw a human soldier standing over her. His armor was damaged, his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes were calm. She remembered all the warnings she had heard. Humans were cruel. Humans loved pain. Humans never showed mercy. Her whole body tightened, waiting for the strike. It never came. He crouched, placed a container of water beside her, and stepped back. Her throat ached for it, but suspicion chained her. What if he wanted to see her crawl? What if this was just another form of torture? She clenched her jaw and turned her head away, but the thirst only grew worse. The rope cut into her wrists. She shifted, winced, and froze as the soldier drew a knife. Terror filled her chest, but instead of cutting her, he sliced the rope. Her hands were free. She pulled them close, staring at the red marks, too stunned to move. He slid the knife away, stood, and said nothing. Confusion spun in her mind. This was wrong. He was supposed to hurt her, mock her, make her suffer. Mercy was not something humans gave. She looked at the water again, hands shaking as she reached for it. The cool liquid slid down her throat, bringing relief and guilt at the same time. She dropped the container quickly, afraid of what unseen price it might carry. He stayed near her, silent, watching the horizon. The quiet pressed on her chest, heavier than any chain. She hugged her knees, unable to close her eyes, waiting for his mask to fall, waiting for the cruelty to reveal itself. When he moved again, her heart jumped, but all he did was place a piece of dry bread near her. Hunger twisted inside her. She told herself not to eat, not to fall into his trap. Yet her hands shook as she picked it up. The bread was rough and tasteless, but each bite warmed her starving body. Shame filled her, but she could not stop. Her fear was different now. It was no longer about pain. It was about not knowing. Why would he risk breaking the rules of war for her? Why show mercy when he had every reason to be brutal? She stared at him through the dark, questions echoing in her mind with no answers. The doubt took root inside her, sharp and dangerous. If humans were truly monsters, why had this one spared her? She sat with her back against the broken wall of stone, her eyes fixed on the human soldier who had freed her hands and given her water. The battlefield around them was quiet now, only the crackle of fire and the distant sound of scavengers moving through the wreckage. Her people had always spoken with certainty about humans. They were called beasts, destroyers, the kind who burned villages and crushed prisoners without a thought. From the time she was a child, she had been told never to expect honor or fairness from them. War with humans had rules, and those rules were always the same. Humans broke them. That was what she believed, until this one had broken the rules in a different way. Her wrists still ached where the rope had cut deep. She rubbed them slowly, her eyes never leaving him. He sat a short distance away, his weapon beside him, his posture relaxed but alert. He could kill her easily if he chose. He could drag her back to his camp in chains, present her to his commanders as a prize. That was the way things were supposed to go. Yet here she was, alive, with water in her stomach and bread in her hand, because of him. It made no sense. She tried to tell herself it was a trick. Maybe he wanted her to lower her guard. Maybe mercy was just another kind of weapon, sharper than steel. But when she looked at his face, she found no cruelty there. His eyes were tired, yes, but not cruel. And that frightened her even more. It was easier to hate a monster than to understand a man. The night grew colder. She shivered, but did not ask for warmth. She would not beg. She would not give him that power. Still, when he noticed, he removed his own cloak and placed it on the ground between them. She stared at it, her pride screaming at her to ignore it, yet her body betrayed her again. She picked it up, wrapped it around herself, and felt warmth seep into her bones. The shame of it burned deeper than the cold ever could. Her thoughts drifted back to the rules of her people. A prisoner must resist. A prisoner must never accept gifts. A prisoner must prepare for death, not comfort. She had broken all 3 rules in one night. She had drunk his water, eaten his food, and now she sat under his cloak. She felt like she had betrayed everything she had been taught. And yet, she could not deny the truth. She was alive because of him. She wanted to hate him for putting her in this position. She wanted him to act cruel so she could curse him and strengthen her heart. But instead, he gave her silence and small mercies, leaving her lost between fear and confusion. The rules of war were simple before, but now every rule was cracking. If he was not following them, then what was she supposed to believe? The human soldier finally spoke, his voice low and calm, carrying easily in the quiet. "You should rest." Just 3 words, but they struck her harder than any blade. Rest? How could she rest near an enemy? How could she trust that he would not kill her in her sleep? She glared at him, refusing to answer, but her body betrayed her again. Her eyelids were heavy, her muscles weak, her exhaustion stronger than her pride. She tried to stay awake, but slowly, without meaning to, she drifted into uneasy sleep with his cloak around her shoulders. When she woke, the first light of morning touched the battlefield. The soldier was still there, standing watch, his weapon in his hand. She sat up quickly, startled to realize she had slept through the night. Nothing had happened. He had not harmed her, had not taken advantage of her helplessness. If anything, he had guarded her. Her confusion grew heavier. He noticed her movement and tossed a small bundle of dried rations toward her. "Eat," he said simply. She caught it, her hands trembling. Again, she fought the urge to throw it away, to scream at him that she was not some pet to be fed. But hunger gnawed at her, and once again she gave in. She hated herself for it, but the food kept her alive. She chewed in silence, her eyes never leaving him. He broke every rule she knew, but not in the way she expected. He had not shown brutality, but mercy. And that mercy was more dangerous than cruelty. Cruelty would have hardened her heart. Mercy broke it piece by piece, leaving her unable to decide what was real anymore. Her mind replayed the voices of her commanders, warning that humans were liars and deceivers. Maybe he was one of those deceivers. Maybe he was waiting for the right moment to use her trust against her. But deep inside, another thought grew, one she tried to silence. What if they had been wrong? What if the humans were not all the same? The soldier's calmness made him seem untouchable, like he was carrying a secret no one else knew. She hated that she wanted to understand him. She hated that she felt safer with him than she should. He was the enemy. She reminded herself again and again, but the words were losing their strength. She looked at him one last time that morning and whispered under her breath, too soft for him to hear. Why? The question echoed in her mind like a drumbeat, refusing to leave her. Why did he cut her free? Why did he share his food and water? Why risk his own safety to keep her alive? She had no answers, only the growing fear that the rules she had believed all her life were nothing but lies. The night was heavy with silence, the kind of silence that pressed against her ears until every sound seemed louder than it was. The fire from the battlefield had burned low, leaving only faint embers glowing in the distance. The alien girl sat close to the broken wall, wrapped in the cloak the human had given her. She did not want his warmth, but her body had betrayed her again, seeking comfort against the cold. The smell of smoke still clung to the air, mixed with the iron tang of blood. She hugged her knees tighter, her eyes fixed on him as he sat a few steps away. He had not left. He had not spoken much. He just sat there, his weapon within reach, his gaze sweeping the horizon like a sentinel. His calmness was frightening. She had seen human soldiers screaming, charging into battle with fire in their eyes. That she understood. This silence she did not. It felt dangerous, like a trap waiting to close around her. Every shadow made her heart jump. Every flicker of light looked like movement. Fear clawed at her chest. She wanted to sleep, but she dared not. What if he turned cruel while her eyes were closed? What if all his kindness was just to make her weak, and the real punishment would come later? Her eyelids were heavy, but she fought against them, whispering to herself that she would not fall, she would not trust. The wind grew colder. She shivered, trying not to show it. He looked at her once, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, moved closer, and set more wood into a small fire between them. The flames sparked back to life, casting light on his face. For the first time, she saw him clearly. Dirt covered his skin, and a scar ran across his jaw, but his eyes held no malice. They were tired eyes, the kind that had seen too much war. She looked away quickly, her chest tightening. Her people had taught her that humans thrived on cruelty, that they fed on the weakness of others. Yet every action of his was breaking that lesson. He gave her water. He freed her hands. He shared food. Now he gave her fire. She pressed her forehead to her knees, trying to block out the questions racing through her head. Why was he doing this? What did he gain? The night stretched long. At times she thought she heard whispers in the dark, faint voices carried by the wind, as though her fallen kin were speaking to her. They warned her not to trust, not to forget the rules. But each time she looked up, she saw the firelight on his face, calm and steady, and doubt grew stronger. Her mind became a battlefield of its own, torn between fear and a strange, unwelcome safety. At one point, she thought she saw movement beyond the fire, a figure slipping through the shadows. She tensed, her breath caught in her throat. He noticed, too. In one swift motion, he reached for his weapon and aimed it toward the dark. The tension in the air thickened, every heartbeat a drum in her ears. But after a long moment, the shadow faded. Perhaps it had been nothing more than smoke and wind. He lowered the weapon, but did not relax. She realized then that he was not just guarding himself. He was guarding her, too. The thought sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Why would an enemy protect her? Why risk danger for someone who should be his prisoner? Her stomach tightened with unease. Mercy was supposed to be weakness. Yet he did not look weak. He looked stronger than anyone she had ever met because he carried his power without cruelty. That made him more dangerous than any weapon. She hated that thought, hated that she was beginning to see something beyond the monster she had expected. The hours dragged on. She forced herself to stay awake, but exhaustion pulled at her until her eyes grew heavy. Every time her head dipped, she jerked it up again, refusing to close her eyes. Still, at some point, sleep stole over her. When she woke, she was startled to find herself leaning slightly against the wall, his cloak still wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The fire was low again, but he was there, seated exactly where he had been, watching the distance. She blinked, realizing with shock that she had slept, truly slept, and he had not harmed her. More than that, she had felt safe enough to let her body rest. The shame of that realization burned hot inside her chest. She turned her head, studying him. He was silent as ever, but something about the way he sat told her he had not rested all night. He had kept watch while she slept. Her throat tightened. That was not the act of a monster. That was the act of a protector. Her hands clenched into fists. She wanted to demand answers, to shout at him, and force him to explain why he was breaking every rule she had ever known. But her voice stayed locked inside. All she could do was stare at him, her mind drowning in questions with no answers. The fire cracked softly between them, and in that sound, she heard her own thoughts whispering louder than ever. Maybe her people were wrong. Maybe not all humans were the same. The idea terrified her more than chains or blades. Because if even one human could show mercy, then everything she believed about the enemy might be a lie. The sun was rising slowly, its pale light cutting through the smoke that still lingered over the battlefield. She sat quietly, her cloak wrapped tightly around her, her stomach heavy with the food he had given her. The human soldier stood a few steps away, his back turned as he checked the ruins around them. His movements were steady, careful, almost calm, as though he was used to this silence of war. She studied him with suspicion, her thoughts battling inside her. Every story she had ever been told screamed that he was dangerous, that his kindness was only a mask. And yet, after 2 nights, he had not harmed her. Her people had rules. Prisoners were not to be trusted. Enemy mercy was always a lie. Accepting food, water, or shelter from a human was a betrayal. These rules had been taught since childhood, carved into her heart like stone. But he was breaking those rules without hesitation. He had given her water. He had freed her hands. He had shared his cloak and kept watch while she slept. Now, as she looked at him, she realized he was about to break an even bigger rule. She had been wounded during the fight. The gash along her arm was swollen and red, the skin hot and painful. She tried to hide it, pulling the cloak tighter, but he noticed. His eyes dropped to her arm, then lifted to meet hers. She stiffened, clutching the cloak. If he wanted to finish her, he could. Infection had already set in. She told herself he would let her rot. That was what humans did. But instead, he walked toward her with a small metal case in his hand. She flinched back instantly, pressing against the wall as he crouched. He opened the case, and inside were bandages, small tools, and vials of liquid. Her eyes widened in disbelief. A medic kit. He was not preparing to torture her. He was preparing to heal her. "No," she hissed, shaking her head. "Don't touch me." Her voice was sharp, but beneath it was fear. He ignored her protest. Slowly, he reached out and caught her wrist, not roughly but firmly, holding her arm steady. His touch was strong, but not cruel. She tried to pull away, but her body was weak, and the pain in her arm stole her strength. He cleaned the wound with water, and she gasped as it stung like fire. He glanced at her, then back at the wound, his face calm. He worked quickly, pouring liquid that burned even worse. Tears sprang to her eyes, but she bit her lip, refusing to cry out in front of him. She had been told humans enjoyed the sound of suffering. If she screamed, he would only smile. But when she dared to look, there was no smile, only focus. When he wrapped her arm in clean bandages, her breath trembled in her chest. No enemy had ever done this. It was forbidden. Healing her was not just kindness, it was rebellion. If his commanders saw this, if his people discovered what he had done, he would face punishment. She knew it, and he must have known it too. Yet he did it anyway. "Why?" she whispered before she could stop herself. The question slipped from her lips like a secret. He paused, his hands tightening the bandage, then answered simply, "No one deserves cruelty." His voice was steady, soft but unshakable. She stared at him, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Those words made no sense. Cruelty was the rule of war. Mercy was weakness. Why would he choose weakness? When he finished, he released her arm and closed the kit. She pulled her arm close to her chest, staring at the clean bandage as though it were some kind of trick. The pain had eased slightly, replaced by warmth she could not explain. Her thoughts spun wildly. He had risked his life, his reputation, his own people's anger, just to give her this. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The fire crackled softly, the morning air carrying the sound of distant crows. Her chest tightened with emotions she did not want. Gratitude, confusion, something close to shame. She had always believed humans were monsters, yet here she sat, her wound cared for by one. The weight of what had happened pressed down on her. If she returned to her people, she could never tell them the truth. They would not believe it. They would call her a traitor, accuse her of lying, of being tricked. But she could not erase the memory of his hands binding her wound with care. She found herself watching him differently now. His silence no longer felt like a weapon, but like a shield. His calmness was no longer terrifying, but steadying. She hated that feeling, hated the crack it made in the wall of her hatred. She hugged her knees tighter, but it did not stop her heart from asking the same question again and again. What kind of enemy risked everything to show mercy? The soldier picked up his weapon and stood, scanning the horizon again. His figure was tall against the rising sun, his shadow long across the broken ground. She realized then that his mercy was not weakness at all. It was strength. It was defiance against the rules of both their worlds. And for the first time, she felt something she never thought possible. She felt safe near a human. The morning was quiet, but the quiet did not last. She sat against the wall, still holding her bandaged arm close, when a sharp sound echoed through the ruins. The soldier reacted instantly, raising his weapon and stepping in front of her, her body stiffened, fear rushing through her veins. She thought for a moment that his kindness was finished, that he had finally decided to turn on her. But then she heard it too. The low hum of voices, the crunch of boots on broken stone. Enemy patrol. Her heart pounded hard. These were not her people. These were human soldiers, armed and searching. If they found her, they would not be like him. They would follow the rules of war. Prisoners were trophies, and she would be dragged away in chains, maybe worse. She looked at him with wide eyes, her breath catching in her throat. He met her gaze, and for the first time she saw urgency there. Without speaking, he motioned for her to stay down. She crouched low, pulling the cloak around her, trying to make herself small. Every instinct screamed that she should run, but there was nowhere to go. The sound of boots grew louder. The soldier moved quickly, scanning the rubble. Then he grabbed her hand. She jerked back in surprise, but his grip was firm, not cruel. He pulled her toward a crack in the wall, a narrow space half hidden by debris. She resisted for a second, fear telling her not to trust, but then she saw the shadow of another soldier appear at the edge of the ruins. She had no choice. She let him lead her into the hiding place. The space was small, forcing them close together. The air was thick with dust, her shoulder pressed against his armor. She tried to steady her breathing, but every exhale sounded too loud. She could hear the patrol moving closer, their voices sharp, their weapons clinking against armor. "Anyone alive here?" one voice called. Another answered, "Doesn't look like it. Just bodies." The soldier beside her stayed completely still. Even his breathing was controlled, quiet. She watched him, amazed by his calmness. Her own heart felt like it would burst out of her chest. The footsteps came closer, so close she could see the shadow of boots through the crack. She pressed her lips shut, praying they would pass. One soldier stopped right outside. His voice was rough. "Strange, someone's been here. Fire's too fresh." Her blood turned to ice. They had seen the fire he had built. Any moment now, the wall would be pulled apart and she would be exposed. She looked at him again, panic rising. His eyes flicked toward her, steady, reassuring. Slowly, he shifted his hand until it rested lightly against hers. The touch was firm, grounding. It told her without words, "Stay calm." She tried. She forced herself to stillness, even as fear clawed at her throat. After a long pause, the footsteps moved on. "Nothing here," one of them muttered. "Let's check the other side." The patrol's voices grew fainter, their boots fading into the distance. She waited, holding her breath, until there was nothing left but silence again. Only then did she realize how close they still were, pressed together in the narrow hiding space. The heat of his presence burned against her skin. She pulled back quickly, her face flushing with a mix of anger and confusion. He released her hand without a word and crawled out first, scanning the ruins again to make sure it was safe. When she followed, her legs trembled with relief. She had been seconds away from capture, from being dragged back into a nightmare, and he had risked himself to protect her. He could have handed her over, earned praise from his people, maybe even rewards. Instead, he had hidden her. Her thoughts spun wildly. This broke every rule she knew. No soldier risked punishment for an enemy. No soldier chose mercy when cruelty was easier. She stared at him, struggling to find words. None came. He moved back to the fire, his expression calm again, as though what had just happened was nothing. But she could not shake the pounding in her chest. He had protected her, shielded her, even held her hand to keep her steady. That simple touch replayed in her mind again and again, leaving her restless. She sat down slowly, her body still shaking. She hated that she felt safer because of him. She hated that her heart raced not only from fear, but from something else she did not understand. He was supposed to be the enemy, yet he had risked everything to keep her free. For the rest of the day, she could not stop watching him. Every movement, every glance, every silent act of protection only deepened her confusion. She remembered the stories her people had told her. Humans were monsters. Humans enjoyed suffering. Humans had no honor, and yet this soldier had hidden her from his own kind. As the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long across the ruins, she sat with her bandaged arm against her chest, her mind a storm of questions. He had broken the rules again, and this time the risk had been greater than ever. If the patrol had caught them, both their lives could have ended. Yet he had chosen her safety. Her throat tightened as she realized the truth she did not want to admit. She no longer feared only him. She feared herself, feared the way her heart was beginning to see him, not as a monster, but as something else entirely. The ruins grew quiet again after the patrol had gone, but the silence between them was different now. She sat with her knees pulled close, her thoughts tangled like a net. The soldier moved about calmly, gathering what little supplies he had left, as though saving her from discovery had been nothing unusual. She could not understand him. He had risked his life, risked his own people's judgment, just to hide her. No rule explained that. No rule allowed it. Her bandaged arm throbbed softly beneath the cloth. Each time she looked at it, her chest grew tight. He had healed her when he should have let her die. He had given her food when he should have let her starve. He had hidden her when he could have handed her over. Each act was a chain pulling her closer, a chain stronger than any rope. She hated that she felt bound not by force, but by something she could not name. The day stretched on, shadows crawling across the broken walls. She caught herself watching him too much. His movements were quiet, practiced, never careless. He seemed to carry the weight of war on his shoulders, yet there was no cruelty in him. She wanted to ask why he did these things, but her pride sealed her lips. Speaking would make her weakness real. As the sun began to sink, painting the sky with red light, he approached her. In his hands was a small pouch, worn and dusty. He crouched and set it beside her. Inside were rations, dried strips of food he clearly needed for himself. For later, he said simply, then stood and turned away. She stared at the pouch, anger and gratitude twisting inside her. Why did he keep doing this? Did he not care about the danger? When night fell, the air grew sharp with cold. She pulled his cloak tighter around her, hating herself for needing it. He sat close to the fire, his face half lit by the glow. For a long time, she just listened to the crackle of the flames, the sound steady against the silence. Finally, her voice broke free, quiet and unsure. "Why do you help me?" He looked at her, his eyes calm as always. "Because it is right," he answered. No explanation, no demand, no hidden reason, just those words. She shook her head, her voice sharper this time. "It is not right. I am your enemy. If your commanders find me, they will kill me and punish you. You know this." "I know," he said, his voice steady, "but I will not do cruelty to anyone, not even you." Her chest tightened, her breath uneven. His words felt like a blade cutting through every belief she had been taught. Mercy was not supposed to exist in war. Yet here it was, sitting in front of her, real and undeniable. She wanted to hate him for it, but the hate no longer came as easily as before. Later that night, the sound of distant guns echoed across the hills. She flinched, her hands curling into fists. He noticed and shifted slightly closer, not touching her, but near enough that the firelight reached them both. His presence, solid and steady, made her heart calm against her will. She realized then that she was no longer thinking about escape. She could have tried to run in the chaos, yet the thought of leaving him filled her with a strange fear she could not explain. The hours passed slowly. She lay awake under the cloak, watching him. His eyes were closed, but his posture told her he was not fully asleep. He stayed ready, even in rest. She wondered what kind of life had shaped him, what kind of battles had carved that calm into his soul. She wanted to ask, but again, her pride stopped her. Instead, she whispered to herself, too soft for him to hear, "What are you?" The next morning came with sharp light breaking through cracks in the ruins. He was already awake, standing at the edge, scanning the horizon. She rose slowly, her body heavy with exhaustion. When he turned back, his eyes met hers. There was no judgment in them, no cruelty, only that steady calm that had begun to unsettle her heart more than any threat could. She knew she had a choice now. He had not bound her again, had not forced her to stay. She could run if she wanted. Her legs were weak but free. She stared at the open field beyond the ruins. Freedom was right there. Yet something inside her held her back. The thought of leaving him, of turning away from the only mercy she had ever known, felt impossible. Her people had told her humans were monsters. But this man, this soldier, had broken every rule. He had shown her care when he should have shown cruelty. He had guarded her when he should have abandoned her. He had given her freedom when he could have taken it away. And now, with the world outside ready to devour her, she realized the truth that terrified her most. She did not want to leave him. Her heart fought against her mind, but the answer was clear. She was no longer his prisoner. She was there by choice, and that choice, she knew, would change everything. The sky was gray with heavy clouds as the two of them moved through the ruins. The girl walked a few steps behind the human soldier, her bandaged arm held close to her chest, her heart heavy with thoughts she could no longer silence. She had spent days waiting for cruelty, for betrayal, for the moment when he would prove her people right. But that moment never came. Instead, he had broken every rule she had believed in. He had spared her, healed her, fed her, hidden her, and even offered her freedom. Each act had been a crack in the wall of hatred she carried, and now that wall had finally fallen. As they reached the edge of the battlefield, she paused. Ahead lay the land of her people. She could already imagine what would happen if she returned. They would demand answers. They would ask how she survived. They would expect her to speak of human brutality, of torture and suffering. But what truth could she give them? Could she stand before her leaders and say that a human had shown her more kindness than anyone in her own army? Could she tell them that his mercy had saved her life again and again? Her chest tightened. If she spoke honestly, they would call her a liar. Worse, they might call her a traitor. But silence was its own kind of lie, and she could feel that the weight of it would crush her. She looked at him, standing tall against the gray sky, his weapon hanging at his side. He had risked everything for her, and now she realized she had a choice to make. The sound of distant voices broke her thoughts. A group of her people appeared in the distance, moving cautiously across the field. They were survivors, soldiers returning to gather the wounded. Her body froze. This was the moment. If they saw her with him, they would strike him down without hesitation. Her first instinct was to step away from him, to create space so they would not think she had allied with the enemy. But her feet did not move. Instead, she stayed where she was, her eyes locked on the approaching figures. The soldier noticed them too. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, she thought he might raise his weapon, but instead, he lowered it and set it on the ground. Then he stepped back. His meaning was clear. He would not fight. He would not risk hurting her people. He was giving her the chance to walk away, to return to them without bloodshed. Her throat tightened painfully. He was letting her go. After everything he had risked, after everything he had done, he was ready to lose her. The cloak around her shoulders still carried his warmth. The bandage on her arm still carried his touch. And yet, he was stepping aside as though none of it mattered. Her people reached them, weapons ready, eyes full of suspicion. They shouted for her to move away from him, to come to their side. She felt their stares burning into her, demanding that she follow the rules, demanding that she denounce him as the monster they believed him to be. Her lips trembled, her heart racing as she looked between them and him. He did not move. He did not defend himself. He simply stood there, calm, waiting for her choice. That calmness, that steady mercy, broke the last of her fear. She took a deep breath, then stepped forward, not away from him, but closer. Her people gasped in shock. "This man spared me," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "He gave me water when I was dying. He healed my wounds. He hid me from his own soldiers. He protected me when he had no reason to. He is not a monster. He is more honorable than anyone I have ever known." Her people shouted in disbelief. Some called her a traitor. Others demanded her silence. But she did not stop. Her voice rose stronger. "You told me humans were cruel, but he broke every rule of war. His mercy saved me. If you cannot see that, then you are blind." The soldiers stared at her, stunned into silence. The human said nothing. He only looked at her, his calm eyes holding hers. In that moment, she knew she had chosen the truth, no matter the cost. Slowly, she turned back to her people, her chin lifted high. "If you want to call me a traitor for speaking truth, then do it. But I will not lie. He is not what you said he was." For a long time, no one moved. Then, one by one, her people lowered their weapons. They were not ready to accept her words, not fully, but they could not deny the conviction in her voice. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not the silence of hatred. It was the silence of doubt. The soldier finally bent, picked up his weapon, and gave her one last look. There was no pride in his eyes, no demand for thanks, only that same calm mercy that had carried her through the darkest days. She felt her heart twist painfully as he turned to leave, stepping back into the ruins without a word. She wanted to call out, to stop him, to tell him that his mercy had not only saved her body, but also changed her soul. But the words stuck in her throat. All she could do was watch his figure disappear into the gray horizon. Her people gathered around her, asking questions, pulling at her arms, trying to lead her away. But inside, her thoughts were far from them. She carried his cloak, his bandage, his mercy. And she knew that no matter what they said, no matter how many times they tried to remind her of the old rules, she would never forget the truth. He had broken every rule. And because of that, he had shown her that mercy was stronger than cruelty, and humanity was greater than hate.